I know I've hit the mark when you eye roll.
So while my husband sits down, I thought I'd introduce myself. I'm Yola. I'm a relationship expert and coach. I'm very passionate about helping people connect better and love better and working through conflicts. My husband here, Russell, he's gonna ask me some common questions that people normally have regarding relationships and, conflicts people have or where things go wrong or anything else that might come up.
Okay.
All right.
So, question the first.
Question the first.
What is the difference between a boundary and a demand?
Okay, so a boundary is at its very core communication of your limits, right? So a boundary serves the role of protecting you and safeguarding you when you no longer feel comfortable doing something or engaging with something or something just doesn't feel quite right for you for whatever reason. And boundaries can be like about a large variety of things. So you can have, emotional boundaries, you can have time boundaries, you can have touch boundaries, in any area or aspect of your life. Um, the critical thing about a boundary, there's two aspects. One is that when you express a boundary, you are communicating what you will be doing to safeguard yourself, right? So it's not about what someone else will be doing. It's about the steps that you will take to make yourself feel better. So, for example, if you don't like the way that someone is behaving, you can start by asking them to change their behavior. You can let them know, hey, I didn't like how loud you were there, or I didn't like the way that you yelled at me, and I'm not cool with that. Um, and that part is more like a request. But to actually make this into a boundary, you need to follow through with the second step, which is letting them know what you will do once they continue to, let's say, not meet that request, right? And so you might tell them, okay, if you continue to yell at me and this is something that I don't feel comfortable with or I don't like being spoken to this way, then I'm actually going to stop this conversation and I'll revisit it again at a later time, right? And so you might walk to the other room, you might take a break from the discussion, and when you do that, that is you setting the boundary. You're saying, this is the step that I'm going to take to safeguard my own well-being because I'm not okay with being spoken to like that. A demand is when, because you don't like something, you expect that someone else do something differently. They change their behavior, they change, something about themselves that you don't like. And that's pretty much it, right? Like, you have that expectations that they are going to change who they are or how they're showing up in their relationship, and you are demanding that change, right? And it could be for any reason. Maybe, and the key component there is that maybe it doesn't align with your values, right? It doesn't align with um, the way you want to show up as a couple, and it doesn't fit with you, and that's fine. But if that's the case, you need to assess maybe where the compromise is and how you're going to find a common and middle ground between the two of you as a couple. Or, you know, if the relationship is even suitable.
Okay. Second question.
Mm-hmm.
Question second. Is eye rolling damaging in a relationship?
Okay, so that's interesting, right? And funny that you would ask this.
Follow-up question. Did you have to prevent yourself from eye rolling when I asked you if eye rolling is damaging in a relationship?
Yeah, because this is something we have to talk about, had to talk about. I think it depends on the mood of the relationship and like where the two of you are, right? So eye rolling is like a type of kind of mocking or belittling your partner or dismissing them, right? And so if they're trying to speak to you from a very serious space or trying to express themselves, explain themselves, really wanting to engage with you to work through something, and you eye roll, you are dismissing them. You're showing your contempt. And when you do that, you are participating in an aggressive type of behavior, right? And so you are escalating the discussion, or you're escalating the environment of that conflict, right?
Okay.
However, there are certain circumstances, like for example between you and I, where you will make the worst dad jokes, or
Mm-hmm.
you are actually eliciting that eye roll, but it is from a place of jest.
Yes.
Right? And so I think you have to know your partner and be in a space in your relationship where you feel comfortable, joking with each other like that, and knowing both of you that it is a joke.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, because it's not like we entered into a perfect relationship and
Yeah.
lived a perfect life. And eye rolling and belittling, those are things that we actually had to work through in the beginning of our relationship to help us get to the point where I'm very comfortable, where it's actually a personal mark of pride for me to get you to eye roll
Yes.
at something that I have said.
Because
I know I've
it's
hit
such
I know I've hit the mark when you eye roll. Question the third. How does your upbringing affect your relationships?
Okay, so can you be more specific?
Okay, let's say you grew up in Europe and I grew up here in North America,
Okay.
for example. So, how has that impacted our relationship? I guess detrimentally. Like, has there been any detrimental impact to our relationship, let's say in the beginning, that we had to work through because of our separate upbringings?
So I'm okay. So that's still like really
Too broad?
but that's fine. I'll work with some examples. There's huge cultural differences, right? The biggest one with us is the way, let's say, the perception of time,
Yes.
right? So for me, time is not this huge like priority. Like being on time feels very suffocating. I culturally I view the world like very kind of, I have different priorities, very integrated. I'll try to do multiple things at once, right? I prioritize, making people feel comfortable and on the moment and what's happening in that moment. And that could be more important than, getting to that event on time, right? And so um, it's just not as offensive to be late, right?
Right.
There are different priorities that are more relationally focused or more focused in the present,
Yes.
right? Whereas in here, it's very disrespectful for people's time and like what they've got going on, right?
Yes. Well, you and I both we met in corporate culture where that whole adage that 15 minutes early is on time, 5 minutes early is too late. That kind of mentality.
Yeah. So in a relationship, for example, I do my best to actually bring you into my world, and I'm like, hey, like this is what it feels like for me, and then you
Yes.
tell me about your world, and you're like, this makes me stressed because I have to think about A, B, C, D, because that's how things function here, and we live here,
Yes.
right?
Because maybe I can be lackadaisical with our time when it's only impacting us, but then when we interact with my family, for example, or
Right.
we're going to a North American function or a corporate function like we used to go to.
Yeah. So then it's about us finding the middle ground, right? And so the more I bring you into my world and tell you about it, I think it gives you that perspective, even though you might still feel a little stressed, even though I might not agree with that level of stress, and say, hey, like, what's up? Why are you so stressed? Chill. But similarly, I can then also have consideration for you that, like, you're thinking about how people are going to react and, how important it is to them, et cetera, and that causes you stress because you feel like you're not being respectful.
Right. So follow-up question to that. Is it incorrect for me or even manipulative for me to tell you that we have a dinner reservation at 8:30 when really the dinner reservation is for 9 or 9:30, for example?
You're asking because you feel it. It depends. It depends. And so for me, it's funny, right? And for
Yeah.
my girlfriends too, we talk about it because they're also, they're like Eastern European. So I'm okay with it from a place of I know exactly why you're doing it. I even kind of suspect that you're doing that. And I don't find it offensive, right? I find it amusing. But somebody else could because they're essentially saying, hey, like you are lying to me or you don't trust me to manage myself or you're not giving me the opportunity to work on this.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. And that's the thing about relationships. There's not always just like a black and white right or wrong answer. It's about like how can you make that work between the two of you in the context of your dynamic, is that okay?
Yeah.
Right? And you can really only figure that out with your partner. And maybe even there's situations where they're more okay with it and when they're not. And that's why it's so important to actually know who your partner is and how they tick.
Yes. Yeah, no, to that point, I think it's less about like when you get to a strong, secure relationship, you realize that it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's finding that common ground where you can both be at least 70% okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And that's an interesting way to put it because there are like, in this sphere of, what makes relationships work, we do know that there are also things that are unresolvable. Like you're
Yes,
never going to
yes,
change
yeah,
the fact that certain things cause you stress.
Yes, as much as I would like to.
Yeah, because it's part of how you've been raised. It's part of maybe also your personality, right? Like for example, one of the things that causes me stress is like really like messy social functions. Like
Yes.
I am so tapped out, and as much as I would like to do this more often with you because you are my little social butterfly. I
am.
can't, right?
Yes.
Like I have limits.
I need to fly.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is, it's about there is a component of like tolerance and acceptance that needs to take place in the relationship, and of course that ties back into the knowing of your partner. All right. Well, I think that wraps up the questions for tonight. Thank you for creating those prompts for me.
Yeah.
If you found this video helpful or insightful or interesting, subscribe, follow, like it. And if you're looking to reach me directly to work with me, or to have access to some tools and resources, then you can always check out my website.
Yeah, there's lots of great tools and resources on the website. Bye, guys.